Hello and welcome to Into the Mythic. I'm really excited to share this live special with you, which is on the fascinating theme of Samhain and the Cailleach. Paul and I recorded this episode last week in front of an audience as part of the Bandon Banshee Festival. Samhain is the time when the veil between the worlds grows thin. Harvest is ended and the Cailleach comes into her power. She is a hugely potent and important figure in Irish myth and folklore, and she's become a bit lost. Like many of the female archetypes, it's so much simpler to reduce the Cailleach to being a Halloween witch or a hag or a pitiful, ugly crone. But there is much more to her, as you'll hear in the course of this episode. Our hosts, the Bandon Banshee Festival, are supported by Cork County Council, Pure Cork and Fáilte Ireland. And Into the Mythic is sponsored, as always, by our friends at Wild Goose Studios in Kinsale. So you're all very welcome, and we're just going to do a little bit of fiddling around because the idea of this is that we do this live and with you guys, and then it'll all be recorded and it will go out as at least one, possibly two podcasts.
Yeah,
because
two.
Our journey we drove together, I realised I thought I had done a bit of research, but there's just so much to be discussed here. It is a really big topic, talking about the Cailleach, and I don't know how we're going to get it all in, but we'll get some of it in. But we're just going to make sure we have the audio right. So you say something there.
So the Cailleach is, she's the oldest creature in Irish mythology. She predates Irish mythology. When the first person set foot in Ireland, she was here.
Okay, stop now. Because we that was just for sound.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Look, I have a list, and we're going to go.
Oh, you have a list.
I have a list.
I don't do lists.
No, he doesn't. And that's the other thing. We might be doing a bit of stopping and starting, and we will also stop to ask for feedback and questions because, you know, it's really lovely to have a live audience of people who are interested in what we're talking about. Usually it's just the two of us, and this is a great thing to have you all here with us today.
Yeah,
so we've got it in sections on my list so that Paul will talk and then we'll stop and we'll see what you make of it. And our goal really is to tell you stuff you won't find easily elsewhere, I suppose. Like if you want to Google, you'll find a certain amount. But if you want to know more than that, you have to ask Paul. So we have some of the deeper, more nuanced stories for you today. But what we wanted to start with is just a little bit about the context of the time of year, because it's highly relevant to discussions about the Cailleach and your festival here in Bandon and the fact that it's Samhain. So I just want Paul to give us a little bit of context about what Samhain means.
Well, you know that we didn't have months of the year in Old Ireland. We had seasons. And the two principal seasons were Samhain and Bealtaine, or summer. Now, there are others, but these were the main ones. And they're incarnate in the Cailleach for Samhain and Breda or Bridget for summer. And in some stories, they're two different beings, and in others, they're all the one. And as summer progresses, Brede gets older and older, and finally, at this time of year, the Cailleach appears. Now, Cailleach, it gets translated modern day as the hag. She's not the hag. She's just a mature woman. It doesn't mean... Cailleach actually comes from Cailleach, which means cloak. And a young person with the Cailleach is a colleen. And you're all familiar with colleen. It means a girl or a young person. And the Cailleach is the cloaked one, the one who wears the cloak. So she's just the older person. So then she gets older and older, and then she starts to get, then when it comes to Bealtaine or Imbolc, the spring, she drinks from a well, or she goes into the land and she becomes young again, and she's young and beautiful and giving, and that's the summertime. So now the veils of the two worlds are at their thinnest. So this is the time when the Cailleach appears. For whether she's a new person or the same one, it's immaterial to us. She appears now, and the veils between the worlds are at their thinnest. There's a skim, like a a haze of dust between the worlds. Manchán used to talk about the skim. He starts his Arán agus im with skim, and skim is this. It could be powder or it can be a veil, a thin veil that you can almost see through. And this is this time of year especially, and at Bealtaine, so we can see into the other realm.
And they can see into our world. So the living and the dead, the gap between us has got very thin. Yeah. And I suppose Halloween has been exported all over the world and has become this huge, big commercialised festival, and a lot of fun for a lot of kids and a lot of sweets. But there are these really complex, fascinating, ancient origins to this festival.
Yes. Yeah. And we used to dress up not as Darth Vader or whoever, but as the dead, basically, so that when they were out crossing over the world, through the veil, through the skim, they'd see us and they'd think, oh, there's one of us, we leave them alone. And that's why we used to carve the turnip, which, if you remember, was really tough. Once we got the huge big pumpkins, we said, wow, this is amazing. You just open it, you take the lid off and it's empty. So whereas the turnip, you have to carve it out. Marie and I were doing workshops with kids during the week, and they wanted us to carve pumpkins with them, and we said, it's impossible. You can't get little kids, small kids carving pumpkins. You can't do it in a day. Or sorry, you can't get them carving turnips in one day. So, but we'd carve the turnip and have an evil face and put a light in it, put a candle in it, and put that in the window, and then we'd dress up as a bit like at the day after Christmas, the
Stephen's Day.
Yes, in Stephen's Day, what do you call it? The Ran. We go on the Ran. You dress up as the dead so that they get confused and they don't take you away with them to their world.
But it speaks to a culture that understood that the death and dead things can't be just pushed to the side. That if you go back into ancient Irish culture, you realise that death was something people lived with and lived alongside and respected, because now we really do live in a time where it's kind of taken away, out of sight, out of mind, and the good life is a life that doesn't have to consider death or the darkness or the dead, and it's all just summer all the time. It's summer and spring all the time. Yeah. So but then, as we know, it just isn't like that, and there's something particularly about living at this hemisphere, at this part of the world where winter has such a character and such a personality that you have to adjust to it and you have to sort of be with it. And I think a lot of these stories are about that. It's about just accepting that there is this turning of the wheel. It's not always summer and it can't always be summer. And these couple of weeks now are when that becomes apparent.
Yes, yeah. And the clock went back this morning.
The clock went back.
So it's dark now. It's a dark time of year.
So that's the context. And Paul, would people have told a lot of stories around this time of year?
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, they told stories all year, but particularly it would start now, because now the dark nights, in the summer they're busy, they're out doing their farming work, because they were mainly farmers. So at this time of year, people would be locked in. It's dark. They're sitting in around the fire. They'd play cards. They'd tell stories. They'd do all this kind of stuff. So this would, from now on, is the time of storytelling, particularly.
And I think of, like, where I live in an old farmhouse on the side of Mount Gabriel near Ballydehob and Skull, and people used to tell stories in those houses, but they would be by candlelight and by lamplight and by firelight. Yeah. And then the neighbours would be walking home in the dark. Yeah. And if you think, what do you need to wake up the ghosts in your system? Yeah. You just have to walk 5 minutes out of a house like that, and everything's alive around you. Yeah. And it's not always pleasantly so.
No. Marie has a story from her father. They lived in Cavan, and when they'd leave the house, the Cailleach house, one of them would sneak around and they'd put their hand on the gate. So they'd come along in the dark, they'd reach out and they'd feel a hand on the gate.
And again, it's about being able to live with the spookiness and the fear, instead of just keeping everything safe and sanitised and summery and brightly lit all the time. Yeah. So this is part of our heritage. It's part of being Irish. It's part of, I think, living in northwest Europe, actually, just where it gets very dark and cold. Yeah. And these traditions are ancient. Yeah. So where we're going to start with the story you were telling me in the car on the way over, which is really, really interesting. And I think what I'm going to say is we're going to try and take it slowly, because, again, these stories were told over nights and days. The old Irish stories weren't told in a nice little kind of podcast 20 minutes. They were told, and you'd probably heard them 4 times before, is the other thing. Yeah. They were told, and then they were told the next night, and then they were told the next night. And you had time for the meaning and the unseen meanings to soak in. So no pressure, Paul.
Okay.
But you can take your time with this one because it's highly nuanced. It's very complex, this story.
Yeah, it is.
No pressure.
And a lot of them seem very simple. And a lot of them were taken by the monks and taken after that and Christianized and sanitized, and the women in it were taken out, the feminine was taken out and all this. But this story it's about the Cailleach. She had great flocks and herds of cattle, flocks of sheep and goats. And she would drive these across the country and up to Scotland and the Isle of Man and all of the Gaelic world. And night after night, she'd move on and move on. And for this story and a whole body of stories, one day she arrived at the Neffenbeg Mountains in Mayo. I don't know if you've ever been there, but they're beautiful, very mysterious, tall. Well, they're not that tall, but they rise up straight from sea level, and there's a lot of them, and they're very misty. There's great walks there, and she stopped there for the day, and the animals scattered to feed. And when morning came, they were even more scattered. Normally they'd be gathered so she could drive them on to the next place, but they were scattered and not willing to move on. So she stayed put. So this means that she was semi-permanent, so humans could approach her for the purposes of the story. So she's here in Neffenbeg Mountains. And a man approaches her because he wants to find out about a particular day that was in the past. And it's really trying to express our human beings' interest in the past. What happened? What was going on before we came? 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. And he asks her, he wants to know about this day, which was called Luan Le Bealtaine. Now, La Bealtaine is the first day of summer, the 1st of May. But Luan it's many meanings. It means Monday, but there were prohibitions about Monday. You didn't shear on a Monday. So Luma and Luan was the shearing of a Monday, and it was something that you didn't do. So something that shouldn't have happened. And Law Luan isn't Monday. Day Luan is Monday. Law Luan means the end of days, the day when we'd all the judgment day, basically. So Luan Le Bealtaine is the Monday of summer's day, which means a particular day, which means the first day, basically in ever. And he wanted to know, it was the coldest day ever, and he wanted to know how cold it was. So he decided he'd ask the Cailleach, because everyone knows the Cailleach is very, very old. So he goes to her and he asks her, and she says, well, I think you need to talk to the eagle of the forge. So he says, the eagle of the forge, right. So she tells him she doesn't know exactly where it is, but he heads off and he's determined to find it. He's like Marguerite tracking us down. He went off and he tracked down the eagle and he found the old forge, and the eagle was there. This huge golden eagle was there. And he asks the eagle says, what do you want? And he asks the eagle. And the eagle says, well, I've been here for this many 100 years. When I was here first, the forge was a going concern. There was the anvil. You see that anvil over there? The point of the anvil was as big as any anvil in the world. And when I'd finish eating, I'd go in and I'd wipe my beak sideways, side to side on the point of this anvil. And over time, it wore it away. And now it's as thin as a knife blade. So that's how long I've been here. But I wasn't here for Luan Le Bealtaine. So you'll have to go and ask the otter of the rock, Dorchu and Charig. So the otter of the rock. So he doesn't know where he is. So he goes off searching for him. And eventually he finds the otter of the rock on a rock in a river. And he asks him, and the otter says, well, I've been here twice as long as the eagle has been around. And I've been here so long that the rock I sit on, I've worn out a hollow in it, so that when I'm sitting in the hollow, someone walking past won't see me. I'm right in the rock. But I wasn't here on that day, so I can't tell you. So you're going to have to go to on Bandon Banshee, the one-eyed salmon, Bandon Banshee, and ask him, because he's twice as old as I am. So, and he's in Asrua, so he had a hint there. Asrua now was the place where Fionn burst the blister on the salmon of knowledge. So it's quite linked with a lot of folklore and mythology. It's supposedly in Donegal, and anyway, he went there and he found the salmon, and he asked the salmon, and the salmon said, "I can tell you, I was here that day." And he said, "How cold was it?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you. The fly flew past over, and I leapt up to grab the fly, and when I came back down, the river was frozen solid, and I landed on the ice of the river, and I was flapping around trying to get back into the river, dying, when a raven flew down and plucked out one of my eyes, which is why I'm the half-blind salmon, the Cailleach, the one-eyed salmon. And the blood, even though it's a salmon, the blood spilled out and melted the ice, and I was able to get back underwater. And that's how cold it was. And the meaning of that story really is that the man is us. The Cailleach is the Cailleach. She's ancient. She sends him to the eagle who governs the air, the skies above us and the high places. But he's not old enough. So he sends us to the Dorchu, the otter. And the otter is between land and sea, land and water. So he covers that area. He's not old enough. So then she's sent to the salmon. We're sent to the salmon. And the salmon goes to the sea and here. And he remembers. But the raven who plucked the eye of the salmon was the Cailleach. So the Cailleach is never ending.
I just love that story.
It's brilliant.
Because it's just kind of crazy and mythic and poetic enough to capture something that is inexpressible, basically. How old is time is the question, really. And it's that thing in humans, as you say, that we want to know our origins. What was here before and what was here before that? Or some of us do. Those of us here today probably do. Yeah. And some people don't care. But those of us who care about it are kind of looking for the origin story.
Yes.
And this is so metaphorical and so poetic that it tries to put a shape on something that's impossible to understand.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And what I love is, for the purposes of today, that it's the Cailleach was there first.
Yes, yeah.
So before there was anyone to tell a story, before there was land, before there were rivers, before there were eagles, there was the Cailleach.
Yeah.
And that's how ancient she is. And I suppose just tying it into Halloween and Samhain, that's why when the translation gets reduced to witch,
yes, yeah,
that's why we have to maybe try and sort of open that up a little bit and push against that we're talking about an incredible mythological archetype that in this tradition has tried to understand the beginnings of time. And you can't just reduce her to somebody with a wart on her nose and a black veil. So I love that story.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we will pause and see, just because if we keep going, you'd have forgotten the first story. Would you like to say anything, if you want to put your hand up or ask a question?
It sounds like really nice what to do as a workshop with children, where they could do art to represent the different characters through material, they make the characters through materials, just so that they're engaging with the characters and it just has that time.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think sometimes language isn't enough to get the head around these really big concepts. And poetry gets as close as you can to it. And sometimes story can give us access to it. But you're right, maybe the physical working with it. Yeah. I love the bit about the otter. I mean, I know they all have similar things, but something about the otter wearing the hole in the rock. That's a really long time.
Yeah.
If you think of how lightly an otter sits on a rock.
Yes, yeah.
And they're curving out this. So it's the time before time, and it's
also the beak on the anvil.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a lot of these stories you get a bit of metallurgy somewhere in them first, because that's going into the Bronze Age or the Iron Age, which in big terms is not that long ago. I mean, it's a while ago. But once you have an anvil, you're in the working of metallurgy.
Yes, yeah.
So you're within the kind of context of
2,000 years.
Plus a bit, only 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Yeah. So that starts, and then you go back to when there were no anvils and there was just otters and rocks. Yeah. So that's how old the Cailleach is. Anybody else want to say anything? Yeah.
Denial of death thing really interests me, and the way that death isn't lived alongside life the way it used to be, and that we're all really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We don't go on for more. It kind of ties in with the poet Robert Blower, who talks about that, the culture of denial. I think America was the first kind of country who had that real culture of denial. We've adopted that along with the American Halloween, that they say we've reduced the Cailleach to a witch with a wart in the end of her nose.
Yeah.
And that is a huge loss, culturally speaking, and also in the way we think about death and the way we teach death to our children or don't. Do you know, at that level, we used to lay out the dead in our living rooms, and a lot of people would do that. But then, as you say, it's kind of sanitising that whole culture. It's taken away from us. You know, we don't have to deal with that. I'd much rather, I don't know. But I think we are, as a culture, as a nation, as a country, looking for that form of expression again.
Yeah, and that's where the Banshee comes in, actually, because we're celebrating the festival of the Banshee, and the Banshee, there was a Banshee attached to every Irish family. She was a woman of the Sidhe, a woman of the fairy folk. We didn't call them fairy, but we do now. But of the Sidhe, and they were a proud race. They weren't just little Tinkerbells flying around. And before someone in your family died, your Banshee would come keening. So that's what the wailing was. It wasn't wordless. Well, it might have been wordless at times, but it was keening, following that ancient tradition of keening. So the scary thing was that someone's going to die in your family and you don't know who it is. It could be you. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's another interesting thing there. I'm sorry, I said I was going to synopsize all the questions, and I've realised it's beyond my capacity. So I'll have to do something with the editing later. But that's a really lovely contribution. Thank you, about the death, and it is what this is all about. It's about reclaiming a little bit of that, because we can't live entirely out of balance. We just can't just constantly live in summer in the daylight. But the Banshee thing is interesting, because I always imagine that your family knows your Banshee. Yeah. So then death also has this bit of familiarity. Yes, it's not just any old Banshee. Yeah. It's not just death in this abstract. It's your family's personification of death, and she comes to warn you, to let you know that it's coming, which must be awful. But at least there's, it's our Banshee.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And it's very important to have the dark as well as the light. You want the light, but I think everyone feels at this time of year, oh, great. And then by the end of it, you've had enough and you're ready for the longer evenings and brighter mornings. But it's great now, I think. It's very important.
But the dark was so much longer in the past as well, because, it got dark, and then you weren't really spending money on oil lamp or candles. Yeah. So, you were just in these darker hours because you had to be. And there was you had to submit to the dark in a way that we don't now. Now we just push on through regardless and work the same amount of hours in the winter as we do in the summer. And anyway, I think we need a revolution around that. We need to slow down in the winter.
Yeah. And go to bed.
Yeah, and go to bed. And I don't know, does anybody else know about this, that it turns out in medieval Europe, it was the norm was to have 2 sleeps at night in the winter. So you'd have first sleep and second sleep. And it was one of those things that was embedded into texts, and nobody really noticed because it was taken for granted that the reader would know about first sleep and second sleep. But somebody did some research on it and discovered that people went to sleep in the winter at about 6 o'clock until about 12 o'clock. And then they got up, had a cup of tea, had a few chats, might have done a few jobs in the kitchen, and had affairs. That was the other thing they did in the middle of. Yeah, exactly. Romancing is a better word than affairs. There was romancing. Yeah. But what? Biphasic sleep. Thank you. Yes, Paddy.
It was weaved out with the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, and they wanted everyone to sleep certain times and get up at certain times and work all day. But actually, probably for most of human history, people who lived up in Europe in these long nights in the winter seemed to have these 2 sleeps, get up to all sorts of interesting things in the middle of the night, go back to sleep then until dawn. Yeah. Which would be lovely, because if you could wake up when the sun got up.
Yeah. When we were on the Blasket Island, Maria and I lived on the Blasket Islands, there was a man there, Sean Fastam Carney, his son Tommy. At 12 o'clock or so, we'd always have boiled eggs. He'd break out the boiled eggs. He'd boil
at night?
At night time, 12 o'clock at night. And we'd have the boiled eggs.
That's great.
Yeah, so it was probably from that biphasic sleep.
Yeah. So that's just, it's a slightly off point, but not really, because this is all about how the rhythms of the year and your life and your sleep, they used to make a lot more sense, and now we sort of push against it all. And it's not to say everything about our modern life is bad, but we have to question some of it. We can't take it unquestioningly.
Yeah. You need to question.
Yeah. Will you tell us we'll move back into my list.
Yeah.
There's the story about what the Cailleach did to the very first humans.
This is a really short story, but there's so much in it. And it was when the first baby was born, the Cailleach was there working as a midwife to the woman. And when the first baby was born, she put her hand on the small of the back of the baby. And it meant that the baby, and all babies ever since, cannot walk until they're about 2. So it was seen both as a hindrance and a blessing.
And is that like almost, you can, when a baby's born, there's a little mark at the top of their bottom there.
Yeah.
And it's like almost like a thumbprint.
Yeah. And they say you can.
Yeah,
you can
and the
see,
obstetrician checks it usually. That's one of the things they check before they let the baby go, because it's where the spine is anyway, they check it.
They say with teenagers, you can see on their calves and on their waist the fingers of the Cailleach, and that's the stretch marks that they get. And that's like the stretch marks you see on the hillsides, where there's scrapes and screeds, because the Cailleach is very associated with making the landscape as well, with her basket of rocks and so on, dropping them accidentally, putting them there purposefully, throwing them, whatever, and making these things.
I think that's really important, actually, because it's so visual, because I can just see these kind of ancient hands forming the baby, the thumbprint, and then the teenager.
Yeah.
And then doing the same with the flesh of the earth, shaping up the earth into mountains and rivers, and that's how archetypal she is.
Yes, yeah,
yeah.
That she was working as a midwife for the first baby. Well, it must have been the second baby because the mother was there. But anyway,
our next podcast will be figuring out where the first baby came from. Yeah, was it the chicken or the egg? That's it. I just love that because it speaks to how old this all is and how important and fundamental it is to the forming of our imaginations, really. You have loads of stories. What one do you want to tell us next? Do you want the walking one? I
could tell the walking one.
Do you want to do the how old is the Cailleach?
Yeah, there's another story of the age of the Cailleach, because we know she's of a great age. And a man wants to find out how old she is. He was a friar. So it's set in Christian times anyway. And he goes along with his boy. He calls to her house. She lives in a long, low house, very low, but very long. And he goes in and she's sitting there. There's a low ceiling. There's a long attic up above. And she's sitting by the fire and she welcomes him in. And he says, well, they get over the first chat and cup of tea and all that. And then he asks her, do you mind my asking how old you are? And she said, I don't mind at all, but I haven't a clue. I'm very old, I just know that. And he said, and she said, I'll tell you what, I kill an ox every winter and I throw the leg bone. I boil it all up. Boil it down, render it, make jelly and all this kind of stuff. But I throw one of the leg bones up in the attic. So if you send your boy up to the attic, he can count the leg bones. So he sends the boy up to the attic and he's got his book out and he's marking, and the boy is saying, one, and he throws it downstairs. And after a long time of this, the book is full, and the friar says, I nearly finished, my book is full. And the boy sticks his head down and says, nearly finished? I've done one tiny corner. And the friar is up to here in bones downstairs. So that just shows you how old she is.
And that leads me to the story of the Cailleach Vera, because I know we were talking about how much we would discuss this, because she's famous in West Cork, the Cailleach Vera. But she is an aspect of the Cailleach that seems to be trying to explain what happened when Christianity came into Ireland. Yeah. And this is something we often get to in our podcast, which is our stories that we find have come through these filters and they've been written down by monks. And I'm always trying to figure out what happened before that and how has that story changed because it was monks that wrote it down. And this is another one of those stories. It's the intersection of the Christian with the pagan.
Yes. Yeah.
And this new religion comes in and tries to understand what was there before. And what was there before is so ancient that it's beyond counting.
Yes, yeah.
And maybe you might tell us a bit about the Cailleach Vera so that we could talk about that.
Garrod O'Crulig, who's the kind of preeminent scholar on the Cailleach, he feels that she's not the Cailleach from Bear, that she's the Cailleach Bjurr, which means pointed one. So she's the specific one. The one, basically. But down here, because of the Bear Peninsula, we've adopted her. So she's our Cailleach. Even though she's all over the country, she's in Scotland, she's in the Isle of Man, all the Gaelic world, there's stories of her. Like there's a place up in Scotland that they only rediscovered fairly recently, and it's a little low house. It's in a very isolated valley. You know about it? Yeah, the Boudica, yeah. And her husband at this stage was the Buddock. Now Buddock, the bud means penis, so he was the buttock. So he was just a male being. And they had their children, and they asked for could they stay in this valley up in Scotland, and the locals let them. So they built them a little low house, and they lived there. And then after a long period of time, they moved away, but they got these river-worn stones that are about 1 metre high to represent the buttock, the Cailleach, and the children. And they said, as long as you put these into the little house in the winter time and take them out in the summertime, this valley will be blessed, and your cattle will flourish, and so on. So they did that for a long time, and eventually everyone moved away from there, and it grew over. But in the 80s or sometime anyway, fairly recently, somebody decided he'd go and find it, and he dug it out, and they found them, and they're there. So now they go and they have an annual pilgrimage where they bring out and put them away. It was biannual, actually, twice a year. What's that, biannual? Twice a year, and they put them in and they take them out. So she's where was I going with that? She's all over the place. Anyway.
Yeah. We were going to talk. That was really interesting, actually. Yeah, that was a good diversion. But you were going to tell us a bit about what happened on Vera, or the local story to Vera is involving the monk who arrives with Christianity.
It's a female saint, actually, Cailleach, and she has her book, her Bible, and the story goes, which I don't believe, but I'll tell you anyway, that the Cailleach saw her asleep with the book, and she stole the book and ran off with it, and Cailleach ran after her and turned her to stone. There where where there's a stone that's supposed to be the Cailleach staring out to sea. There's another story that she's waiting for her husband, Manannán Mac Lir, to come home, and he doesn't come home, and she turns to stone. But in this one, anyway, this is the Christianized version of it. She gets her book back, and she turns the Cailleach to stone. So that's kind of the changing of the old world into the new world.
But you're not sure if this really happened?
Oh, it didn't happen. It didn't happen, no.
And one of the really fascinating things about the myths and the folklore is that they kind of weave in and out of each other, and you get different scale of stories in different places. But some of the local stories are trying to explain something local to that place, like a beautiful piece of stone rock looking out to the sea. But it does capture something around the ebb of the pagan culture at that time.
Yes.
So it's both, because the lament of the Hag of Vera, as it's translated, or the Old Woman of Vera, is her looking at her kind of withering body, and her remembering her beauty of youth, and how she had all these gorgeous husbands, and she'd had the best of everything, and now she was just sitting, getting older, getting thinner, and everything was ebb.
Yes,
the flood was at an ebb, and I think that represents the ebb of the pagan times.
Well, that was written in the 9th century, so that Christianity was very established then. The other thing about that story is she ends up as a nun and lived happily ever after. But the Cailleach Dubh was a nun. So there's different. The Cailleach is used in different ways, but Cailleach Dubh was a nun. So I think someone just said, and a poet, and he wrote this. It's a beautiful poem, but it's not about our Cailleach. Well, it's the cloak. Yeah.
It's very multi-dimensional, and then I suppose with all these stories, people have to find their own way into them, and you have to find your own way into your landscape.
Yes, you do.
I think that's one of the recurring things, that there's no point in abstracting this Cailleach. You have to go and be where you live and somehow find that in your landscape.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is, really. That's what she is.
And you also have to let stories peter out, and you have to also allow for inconsistencies, that she's this and she's that and she's here and she's there. And like the Cailleach occurs pre-human, and then she occurs during the Tuatha Dé Danann, and then she occurs during the Crave Rua, the Red Branch Knights or Ulster. Then she appears in the Fianna, and then she appears in Christian times. So she's always appearing, and she's appearing in different guises. Sometimes there are several Cailleachs, sometimes there's just one. Sometimes she's two, she's Breed and Cailleach. Sometimes, so you have to just let your mind get away from this modern start, middle and finish to a story, and just embrace them all and have them all there, and you get a little bit from here and a little bit from there. And I think that's another reason why these stories have fallen out of favour, that someone wrote them down. And if you write these down, they're so bland and so pointless and so silly, really, that you don't get the full meaning of the stories.
They're also not, they don't have this narrative arc. Like if I went to my publisher with some of the myths you tell me, and like I had to edit them to get them out, to get them straight, because they all go, and then this, and then this,
Yeah.
and then this,
Yeah.
and it's very much the Irish psyche, that we don't really do things in this, A plus B equals C, or and you'll find this as a storyteller, that the stories have their own little lives, and they don't like being just beginning, middle and end, which you would have to do in a published novel. But that's partly why we have to speak them.
Yeah,
So do you want to tell us another story? Do you want to tell the walking one, or what one would you like to
The
tell?
walking one is a good one.
Yeah, okay, you tell that one.
She was still in Neffenbeg at this stage, and a man who was a great walker, he was the best walker of anyone he knew. He knew that the Cailleach was would be a better walker than he, but he wanted to see how good she was. And so he approached her and asked her, did she want to walk to Galway with him? And she said, well, sure, I have to go for a couple of carding combs for the wool, for the sheep. You'll make the road a bit shorter. So, yes, I'll go with you. So they head off and they walk, and he's got a great gait and he strides along and she's walking along with him, and they're chatting away. And before they know it, they reach Galway. And she gets her carding combs and they stop and have lunch, probably Shop Street. And they have lunch and then they head for home, and they're heading for home and they're going at a great pace. Now he's beginning to flag at this stage, but he doesn't say a word. And another man meets them and starts walking with them, and they're way in the countryside, because this is Neffen, this is Mayo. Like, to go to Galway would be crazy. You'd go to Castlebar or somewhere, but anyway, you wouldn't walk it either. But anyway, they're there and they're walking along, and next thing they reach a great river, a wide river, and they stop. And the man is looking up and down. He said, there's a place about 10 miles down where there's a waterfall and you can cross over there. There's stepping stones. And the Cailleach says, I couldn't be bothered. So she picks up the man who asked her to walk and she leaps across the river, and she leaves the other fella behind. And he says, what about me? Do you not want me? Do you know what did I ever do? And she's, no, it's nothing to do with you. Nothing personal. We just have to let this lie. But I can't help everyone. And this man was with me. So she carries on. She puts him down and they walk on. And they get to the man's house. And she says, are you married? And he says, yes, I have a wife in there. And she said, right, does she make butter? And he says, she does. And he says, so you have some butter. She's a few crocks in there. So she said, when you go in tonight, get her to take out a crock of butter and open it, put the end towards the fire and put the top away from the fire, and you lie down, take off your shoes, your Saxon shoes, your boots, and put them in the butter. If you don't, you will die. Because he's overdone it. He's overwalked himself. He'll just die because he can't walk as much as the Cailleach. So she carries on her few more miles to home. She milks her goats. She does a few different things and eventually goes to bed, and she's fine. He goes in and his wife greets him and meets him, and he says, get out a firkin of butter, please. And she gets that out and she opens it, and he lies with his feet in it. And when morning comes, he's sucked all the butter out of it. It's all melted into his feet and cured him. And he's back to normal. And this story really, this story really is that he's us, of course, wanting to find out how good she is, how big she is, how great she is, wanting to work out the world. And he overdoes it, of course. So as a man, he's been the hero. He's been the walker. So she wants to put him back in balance. So she puts him in contact with the feminine, the wife who makes butter, which is a feminine task, churning the butter and storing it. So he has to get in touch with the feminine, lie with his feet in the butter overnight, and that brings him back to normal.
It's brilliant,
I think it's an
isn't it?
amazing story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the kind of correction of the hubris. He's trying to keep pace with the divine. And he will die unless he then takes her. But I mean, there's a sort of a compassion in it from her. Like in the Greek gods, they just kill you or something.
Yeah.
But actually, there's this nurturance built into the archetype.
Yeah, there is.
Where she's willing to let him heal.
Yeah.
And the butter's really interesting. The butter is really interesting and really important because it links to the cow, obviously, and the cow is female.
Yes.
And the butter is from the mammary of the cow. And Irish society has, thousands of years.
And one of her names is Bui.
Bui, yeah.
Which Baoi or Bui father, which is from butter. Comes from butter. Like she's known as Digda in that story about the poem, The Hag of Beara. She's Birog of the Mountain in Fionn McCool earlier the Glasgivna, the cow that gives and gives and gives. She's in that story, and she's Birog of the Mountain in that, and she's Melukra in the Fionn McCool story in Mount Slieve Quillen or Gulban. Mount Gulban, Slieve Gulban, that's it. Up in Armagh, there's a story about that as well. So she's all these different names, and she's Bui down here. Although you had a story about Bui, one of your local men.
Yeah, it's not entirely verified, but it's an interesting insight into folklore and into story, because I was in Castletown Bear on Friday working with a group about writing, and I asked them what did they know locally, because I actually find one of the things to be careful about with this is to think that you're going to find the truth of a myth in a book.
Yeah.
Or the truth of a story in a book, because you're probably not.
No, you're not.
So I just thought I'd ask them. And one guy was Generations Bearer, who was an O'Sullivan, and we were talking about bui, and I was saying, butter and yellow and what's Jersey in Irish?
Ilan Bui.
Ilan Bui, yeah. So Jersey is Ilan Bui.
Because she was said to live there in one of her incarnations.
So I had all these little bits that I'd been researching over the week to tell this O'Sullivan, who then told me that his uncle or his granduncle, someone who was well in touch with the old stories, told him that in Castletown Boyar, the bui was a thick rope that was used to tie a boat to a boat by O'Sullivan Bear 500 years ago, however many years ago, and that's what his uncle swore bui was. And that's the kind of story, that's the kind of information you wouldn't get.
Yeah.
And it gets lost in the kind of academicising, which is also wonderful.
Yeah.
But just to share that. So is it true? I don't know. Is anything true? I don't know.
Even in the non-academic stories, like the go-to book for mythology would be Lady Gregory's book, because she was the first person to take them all and put them into a story, into a recognisable story. And they're brilliant books, Cuchulainn of Morhevna and Gods and Heroes, or whatever it's called. But she wrote to W.B. Yeats, I've left out this bit, and I didn't put this bit in, and I didn't think this bit of sex was appropriate. So she left out bits. So you just can't trust anyone. You can't trust us. Don't trust anyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, and everybody puts their slant and everybody puts their filter. Yeah. And maybe that's part of the fun, but it's just to be aware of that when you're looking at these stories. Yeah. And we have that every time we talk about a story. Yeah. I think, who wrote it down? What was their unconscious bias? What was their conscious bias? And why are we hearing it this way?
Yeah.
And part of what we like to do is kind of shake that up a little bit and kind of think outside that and maybe just receive the story.
Yes.
Yeah. There's two things you said there that I wanted to follow up on. I think the cow of plenty.
Oh, the Glasgivna, yeah.
Glasgivna. Yeah. Maybe I don't know if everybody knows about this, but it's worth just referencing. Yeah.
Well, she crops up in a lot of stories during different times. She crops up. St. Brendan had her. She was up on Mount Brandon, and somebody came to milk her, and because she just kept giving milk, gave and gave and gave. So she was the cow of plenty, and he put a sieve under her. And St. Brendan was up saying mass and didn't realise what was happening. And the cow looked down and saw what was happening, and in despair kicked the sieve away and galloped away. And there's several areas where there's hoof marks, giant holes in the ground where the Glasgivna danced away. But the story I was going to tell was an earlier one, and it was during the Tuatha De Danann and Baelor of the Evil Eye. It was forecast, he was the king of the Fomorians. He had an eye that could turn into stone, so they kept it covered. But it was foretold that his grandson would kill him. So he came up with an easy way, an Irish solution to an Irish problem: get rid of his daughter. Not kill her, but put her on an island. So she was put in some stories. She was put in a glass.
Well, I was going to say the Greeks did this as well.
Yes.
Cronus did this. They hid away any of the children that were going to kill them.
Yes, yeah.
Get rid
and it doesn't work. It doesn't.
Apparently not.
Don't do it. It doesn't work. So she was put away in a glass tower on Tory, they say, but anyway, on an island, and But anyway, Cian, Cian Visconti, who became the great king, he had two brothers, Gibna the smith, the great smith, and Samhain, Thin. So he had two brothers, and he owned the Glasgivna at this stage. And Baylor wanted the Glasgivna. He wanted that cow, and was trying all kinds of tricks and ways of getting it. And Cian wouldn't let him. And one day Cian went to get some weapons made to his brother's forge, and Samhain was there as well. And Samhain had brought a new kind of iron, because this was this era, the change over time. And so Cian came along and said, "Here, hold on to this cow for me, really. Don't let go, whatever you do, because it's the Glasgivna. And I'm just going in to talk to Gubnu." So he went into the forge and was chatting to him. Meanwhile, Baylor sees his opportunity. So he takes the form of a little innocent boy and goes up to Samhain and says, "How are you doing? I was just walking past there and I heard them talking in there, saying they were going to use some metal or other for Cian's weapons and give you the inferior stuff." So Samhain is incensed. And he says, "Here, boy, hold this cow." And he charges in, and they say, "What?" Oh, and as soon as he says it, Cian realizes something's afoot. So he runs out, and the cow is gone. Balor has taken him across the water, across the sea. So Balor goes to, who does he go to? The Cailleach, otherwise known as Birog of the Mountain. She's in this case, she's a female. What do you call them? Druid, a female druid. So she says, "Oh yes, Balor has taken her across to the island. But I'll take you there." So she puts a guise of a woman on Cian, and she blows the two of them across to the island, and they get there, and it's the island where Ethelyn is being looked after by her women, her guardians, and she says to them, "Could you please, we're just landed, we're just shipwrecked, there's a princess from Ireland, she needs sustenance and a night, a place to sleep for the night. Could you look after her?" So they didn't want to turn away a princess, so they said okay. So they went up, and then Birog plays music on her harp and puts them to sleep. But Ethelyn is still awake, and Cian takes his own form, and Ethelyn says, "I've dreamt about you." And they immediately embrace and make love. And from that, Lugh is born, their son. So Lugh, who later became husband of the Cailleach, actually, funny enough. But he, and in the great battle, he kills Balor of the Evil Eye. So
this feels like a sort of 8-part Netflix series.
Yes.
And you'd have to give each episode a full working out to get to the bottom of the story, because there's a lot of characters.
Oh yeah, and there's just that, yeah.
And I would just say, I think the critical point about the sieve for the Glasgivna is that the cow gave until the bucket was full.
Yes.
Because she had just unyielding generosity. But when the sieve was used, it never filled, so they were tricking her.
Yes, yeah.
And that's when she ran away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a critical point, that she had this unending generosity. There would be enough milk for anyone who wanted a bucket of milk.
Yeah.
But when they tried to trick her with the sieve, she looked around, realised what was happening, and stopped the milk.
And that could be like a comment on farming practice, like nowadays.
Yes.
Where we've got sieves under all our cows, and we've so many cows, there's no place to put them, and we've nowhere to put the shit and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to highlight it, because
Yeah.
it feels like an amazingly old metaphor for something that we're really at risk of now.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the cows, it's the fish, it's the chickens, it's everything.
Yeah.
Too much has been taken, so the bucket is never filling up, and the contract's been broken. So there was this contract of absolute abundance and generosity from the Glasgivna until she was tricked and somebody tried to take too much. I just think that's really potent.
It is very, very.
And links to the Cailleach, because again, it's butter and it's the feminine and it's this ancient abundance that will be there as long as you don't exploit it.
Yeah.
So let's picture the imbalance again between the masculine and the feminine. There's like a hierarchy, and then feminine is pushed aside and its balance is gone.
Yes.
Because there's nobody overseeing. I'm not overseeing, but
Well, there's no balance. The balance is taken away because men have been given the power, and the women are pushed into the background. Yeah. And the feminine. It isn't even men and women. It's masculine and feminine aspects of every one of us. And we need now to get back in touch with the feminine aspect of all of us. It's no good having Maggie Thatcher as Prime Minister because she'll do terrible things. You know, she's as much a man, more of a man than you'll ever be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that works for us doing this together, sometimes I think, I should just be working with a whole load of women to talk about the lost sacred feminine, but actually working with Pole, because you're a man in touch with your feminine. And I'm a woman in touch with the two sides as well.
Yeah.
And actually, the real thing that we're aiming for is to be able to do those things together.
Yes, yeah.
And not just be splitting off, because it gets richer. And anyway, that's just my little thing that I have been trying to work out. That I think one of the things that works well in this project is that we both bring both sides to try and to understand these new stories. Yeah. You know, rather than just trying to say, well, just women should be sorting this out.
Yeah.
It doesn't work really. I think if you try and do that.
I think that's the great power of the Cailleach. That she is the feminine embodied, personified.
Yeah, she's.
I think as well, you know, people telling the stories, when they're telling about the Cailleach, they realise, well, she needs a man to make a baby. So they bring in these husbands, and there's another husband, Macroth, the slave of the wheel, Macroth. He was her husband for a long time. And at one stage where she lived near Fermoy at this stage, and there's a river there, and what did he do? He insulted her in some way, and she threw a giant rock at him and pinned him in the river. And he's still there under the rock, waiting to get out.
Well, one of the recurring themes is that, and you see this across the mythologies, is these kind of female archetypes have multiple husbands.
Yes.
There's never just the one nice guy who sees her through. They are the sort of voracious. There's a voracious potency to these women, these female archetypes, and they have multiple husbands and multiple children.
Well, in one story, she lives for 7 generations, and she has husbands during all that time, and she grows young. She's young. She stays young, and she has 7 generations of families, which made all the tribes of Ireland, and she had 52 children who all had children. So that's another aspect of her husbands and her life and her love life, I suppose.
And the other one I'm thinking of, which it sort of relates a bit to what you're saying, is the Banashri, the idea that, and this is not that long ago, and this is a matter of historical record to some extent, that kingship in Ireland was linked to marrying the land.
Oh yeah, gosh.
So every king of every region in Ireland, so I don't know how many kings you'd have, but you'd have kings and sub-kings, it wasn't just one king, would marry the land and undertake to be a good husband and a good steward of the land. Yeah. And if they weren't, the land would fail and the tribe would suffer. So there was one land, but there were, again, multiple husbands undertaking to be good lovers, good husbands, good stewards. I think there's something really interesting there. We'll have to do another podcast on that one.
And up until the 16th century, the ritual of king making, of making a Taoiseach, they weren't really kings, but a Taoiseach was the marrying with the land. And there are stories about that. There's one of Cailleach, the Niall of the 9 hostages. He and his 4 brothers, they were out hunting one day, and they were parched with thirst, and there was a well guarded by the Cailleach, and or a Cailleach, and they one by one they went to the Cailleach and asked her to allow them to drink the water, and she said, "I will, for a kiss." And each one of them is repulsed, disgusted, except for Niall, who embraces her in his arms and kisses her, and she turns into a beautiful young woman, and he can drink his fill, and he becomes king. He becomes the High King of Ireland. So it works.
He's a direct ancestor of mine. He is.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. 9 of the 9 hostages. We did a DNA test when my dad was 60, and apparently we're directly descended. So I'm delighted about that.
Okay.
So he kissed the crone. But the thing about that is this thing, I was going to the last bit, and then you can all go off to your Sundays, was this: how does the Cailleach look? And we talked about the witch and the wart on the nose, but part of the imagery of the Cailleach is the opposite of what we would call beauty. It's like it's a kind of an ugliness. There's supposed to be a hairy, unkempt ugliness, and that story really kind of illustrates that.
Yes, yeah.
That she has all the potency, but the young men see nothing of value in her.
Yeah. It's kind of like Hollywood. Once a woman reaches 27. That's it. She can only play Cailleach after that. She can't be the love interest anymore. Whereas the man can be in it, like Cary Grant. He was gay and he was 60 and he was still the leading man, you know.
But then there's also the kiss from the young man rejuvenates
Yes, yeah.
the older version, because there is this turning of the wheel, and this archetypal female represents spring, summer, autumn, winter. It's all of it.
Yeah.
And maybe this is part of the archetypal male, the green man energy. That's renewing as well. So the two together can renew. But the ugliness is significant.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And you have to be able to see past it to get to the magic of the Cailleach.
Yeah.
And I think you have to see the land at winter, you know, at its coldest, darkest, least growing time. And you have to see the beauty in that to access that real energy of the Cailleach.
Yeah.
So in about a month and a half, no, February probably.
Yeah.
January, yeah.
They say she had a stick, a big stake, and a big stick, yeah. And she'd walk around with that, and when she struck the ground, ice came out from it and spread and spread and spread.
So it's not pretty and it's not easy, but it's hugely potent.
Yeah.
And that's where it's not one of those easy magics. You have to access it through a bit of ugliness and a bit of complexity and maybe even a bit of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, death.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sinead, really, for what there's loads more, but I think that's enough for any set of brains for today. Yeah. But if there's anything that anyone would like to say before we finish up, there's a little bit of time if you want to say something. Yeah.
Can I ask about the veil one? About that mythology?
I think maybe the veil is a more modern, more English language version of the cloak, because she wasn't.
Also in Greek, or in Isis,
Yeah, but that's Greek. That's Greece. So who knows what the connection would be? Like here, she had her cloak, and we have the skim. So we have the veil between the worlds. So it's kind of like a good metaphor. But I don't think she didn't wear a veil. She just had a cloak. She was a cloaked one. Right. So the veil is more. I think it might be more recent.
Spoke at the beginning about the two main seasons, summer and the winter, and how the Cailleach represented the winter, and maybe breeze the summer. And I think I kind of got a bit lost with all the different stories about, how that fits into the different stories.
Who knows? There are lots of stories about Breed and all her. That's just a different podcast. yeah.
Which maybe we could come back and do, actually. And we could do something about the fertility season.
Yeah.
And I suppose this is about this time of year.
Yeah.
And maybe the complexity of trying to see the beauty and the potency in that when we don't naturally celebrate the ugly, the old, the cold,
the dark.
Yeah. But how it all fits into old stories, good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just there in it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And you need it all, is the point.
Oh, yeah.
And all Indigenous cultures understood that. Yeah. And the fact that we're even having to remind ourselves is a sign of things have gone out of whack.
Yeah.
Because every other culture for time immemorial understood that you needed all these bits. Yeah. So we're trying to remind. Do you want a poem? This is a really lovely poem, and it's short, and I just want to share it because I have it printed out in front of me. And I just want to share it, and then you can all go home. And it's by Leanne O'Sullivan, who is a beautiful poet, from the Beara. And I found it during the week, and I just want to share it. So it's The Cailleach to the Widow. The universe said to me, "Old woman, I have learned a few good things. That when one part dies in me, another comes tearing through the darkness like a star, sudden and tender and painful as hell. Each time I have sat at the centre of the world to see it. Each time I have crawled the dark of my own belly to not see the shape of the great light coming and the dying one washed in such kindness rising steadily towards it." Well done, Leanne O'Sullivan.